Hello and welcome to All Stats Aren't We, a podcast in which Leeds fans cast their combined eye over goings on at Ellen Road, giving scrutiny to the underlying statistics and tactical footings at work at Leeds United. I'm Adam Elliott, and I'm joined today by Martin Riley. Hi, Martin. How are you?
I'm not doing too badly, thank you, Adam. We're recording at a slightly different time today.
It's
during
light.
the afternoon. It's light, very light. So I've not had my tea yet, but I have had a nice. Breakfast butty with sausage, bacon, and hash brown. So that was good. How about you? How are you doing?
I think lunch and brunch time content might be even better than tea time. I'm all right. I had a teriyaki noodle bowl, chicken, sesame seeds, spring onion, homemade, not one you just buy and shove in the microwave. So that was decent. And my tea is not pasta tonight, even though I'm now recording ahead of that. I just want people to know because everyone says that that's all I eat, but it's not. So up yours, everyone.
But
Anyway.
you have had a form of pasta for lunch, though. So
Noodles. I guess if you're American,
it's a relation. It's a relation for sure.
Yeah, it's a cousin, but not quite the full throne thing. Anyway, well, we are at Leeds have just been playing in Birmingham, and we're going to be playing in Birmingham again this weekend across the city in another place in that lovely city of Birmingham, where we do have some subscribers, so it must be nice about the place. But Martin, I want your reaction quickly to beating Birmingham City in extra time on penalties first.
Yeah, we scraped by a little bit there, didn't we? We could easily have got into second half a goal down. There's a good save from Lucas Perry in that first half. Then second half we were better and we were good value for being ahead. And then we just got a bit unlucky with them scoring from a deflected goal, which I think Perry was going to save if not for that deflection. But yeah, good that we won on penalties quite convincingly as well on penalties. Good penalties from all the players who took one. And yeah, so can't complain. We're through to the next round and to face a nice narrative team in the next one for us.
Indeed. Yeah. Norwich, obviously, we'll speak about that in a second. I do think there were some issues with the game against Birmingham. Cohesively, we weren't as good as we have been in other games. There was obviously a slight change in sort of personnel. Stylistically, I don't think we managed the game very well at all in the first half. We improved in the second a lot after Ethan Ampadu came on, but it did feel like Farke had to turn to the cavalry. Obviously, a lot of fans are going to say, well, you've kind of got two sides to this, and I kind of see both. Players are not taking their chance that we've got in reserve when they come in. And also those players that aren't taking those chances maybe aren't the sharpest right now, haven't been playing a lot in the league in terms of coming on as a sub, and that has a knock-on effect as well. To kind of see both sides of that, I do understand where people are coming from. Would have liked to have seen a bit more from Tanaka and Nonto, for example, in the league. That might have helped them in this cup game. Their confidence must be quite low considering they're not playing in the league. That's all well and good, but they didn't play particularly well here, and they did against Derby in the round before, which was why it was a little bit confusing to me. But we made it through, even though we had to call on the cavalry, although that did mean some extra minutes in the legs of Ampadu that you probably wouldn't have wanted considering he came on at half-time. But it's fine. We're in the next round, and then we're one away from the quarterfinals, and then we're one away from Wembley, and that's maybe going a bit too far. But Norwich is definitely an opportunity, isn't it? And even though there is narrative there, even though they have improved a lot under Philippe Clement, it seems like it's a good tie for Leeds to get them at home.
Yeah, there's definitely worse ties that we could have had. I think the most important part of it is that it's at hhome.
You save yourself on travel as well.
Exactly. Apologies, I'm feeling a bit down and dumps today. But yeah, it's a good draw, but there's much worse draws that we could have had. Yeah, can't complain about it all.
Yep, same. Pretty happy with that one. And yeah, just a quick one before we move on to talk about Aston Villa. We did say there might be some extra content this week, but from me being busy, from other people being unavailable because of quite a few things have hit the team recently, not all been great. And then Martin's also unwell. We've not done any extra stuff recently. We'll try and do something soon. But yeah, maybe that Norwich game when it comes up, we'll probably do something around that or something like that. But you can still subscribe on Patreon where we do have extra content at patreon.com/ASAW Patreon, because yeah, there's plenty of bonus stuff that's gone out this season and lots of it's still relevant. And just a reminder before we get into Villa as well, like and subscribe on YouTube. Hi again. It's nice and light. You can see me and Martin in very nice natural lighting rather than some fake lamp. Anyway, let's get into this then. So should we discuss Villa then? They're managed by Unai Emery. He is now, you've got this note down, I believe this is correct, but the fifth longest serving Premier League manager in the division. I can't think of who the four longer ones would be. Obviously Pep, Eddie Howe maybe.
I admit this was from AI, so that little pinch of salt there. But yeah, that's what AI told me was the fifth longest serving manager.
I can't be bothered to do it, but yeah, he's one of the longest serving. You've got here best win percentage in Villa's history, consistently in the European spots with 4th and 7th place finishes in recent seasons, and that it must be nice. I agree with all that, especially considering they got promoted 1 year before us and they've not been relegated since, whereas we have. But it felt like we were kind of mirrored for a bit. There was also the season we came up and we finished 9th. I think they finished 16th or 17th that season. And then ever since then, we lost Bielsa. They brought in Emery. Our fortunes both went opposite directions. So they've had a good time of it lately, and they are currently 3rd. And in a title race, they're not quite in a title race, but you know they're involved because they're in with a shout in terms of points at the very least, even if other factors probably are going to stop them from winning the league. Anyway, transfer activity then, Martin. Tell me about that, because they were busier than us in January, that's for sure.
Yeah, they did sign a few players. They brought in Tammy Abraham, signed as a backup to Watkins. Bit of a weird situation there. He went to Turkey, and then not long after that one being confirmed, he signed for Villa, which was a bit of a weird situation.
Possibly he just wanted to be in England again, and obviously he's played for Villa before. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and then they signed a young Brazilian right winger called Alisson. Don't know anything about Alisson. Signed for 10 million from somewhere in Brazil. I forget the team it was from, and then they re-signed Douglas Luiz on loan from Juventus, I want to say. Yes. Yeah. And then the only outgoing of note really was Evan Gesson, who signed for Palace on loan. And there's a couple of loanies going out, but no one had really made any sort of contribution to them this season. So yeah, the main things is those 3 signings who got brought in and the one major outgoing.
2 players they knew, and then 1 player I haven't got a clue about. Yeah, re-signing 2 players that they know they can trust. Obviously, Emery's worked with Luiz. Abraham hasn't worked with Emery, but knows the club very well. And obviously, knowing the club is always the most important thing in football, as the Square Ball Boys would let you know. Let's talk about them in possession then, Martin, and what they're trying to do under Emery. How does that look at the moment?
So it's a 4-2-3-1. That's the pretty much standard Emery ball. Pretty narrow attack with the wingers looking more like wide 10s, really. Lots of rotation around the final third. All the 3 behind the striker do wander around the final third, looking to find pockets of space in which to be effective. Lots of shots from distance, and they score a lot of them too. They do mix up the approach play. They have capable ball players in deeper areas, so they kind of navigate around the press, but they also aren't shy of looking for longer balls. Watkins isn't necessarily strong aerially, but they look for more balls that he can run onto when they do go long. So that's a bit of a get out when they are quite heavily pressed or just want to quickly get up the pitch. And then when they do get to final third, there's something which stands out a lot in their stats. They've had 116 shots from distance, and they've scored 13 goals from those 116 shots, which works out an XG of 4.05, scoring 13 goals from them. So they've found ways of getting these long distance amazing footballers where they're scoring goals from distance and get them in situations where they increase their chances. And there's been a lot talked about on this recently. I'd really recommend the recent article which The Athletic put out, which talks about shooting from distance. Arsenal was one team who was looked at, Villa another, and also Harry Wilson from Fulham. So there's a few different players.
Read that, but
it's interesting.
Was part of their conclusion perhaps that maybe it's more sustainable than it appears on paper?
Not really, no. It was just more like there's manufacturing situations where they increased the chances because there was more space, like kind of like overloading the wide areas. So there's a space in the middle when the opposition defenders are drawn over, and then you just lay it off to just outside the box when there's space, and then they can shoot from there. That's the kind of conclusion which came with. I think it always depends on the players that you've got as to whether long distance shooting can be sustainable or not. And I think the level of the players in the Premier League is probably the highest it's ever been, and that does help for sure.
Yeah, they do have. Sorry, I'll interrupt while you're coughing through that. They do have quite a few like ball strikers from range that are reasonably sustainable through their careers. Kamara's pretty good for it. McGinn's been pretty good for it. He's probably got one of the best ever championship goals, for example, from range. Buendia and Rodgers both really excellent in that regard. So, like, certainly when you look at those profiles, to me, it sounds probably more sustainable than it appears when you've got 13 goals from 4.05 expected goals. I think there's probably players that can do it. They're not all prime, I don't know, Gerrard, Lampard, Van Bronckhorst. They're not all those kind of players, but, they're players that can definitely score from range fairly, but much better than like your average Premier League player anyway.
Yeah, exactly. But then the other thing of noting from the stats is that although they've overperformed on the XG outside the box, inside the box, they've underperformed it quite a lot. So from inside the box in general, 14 goals from just over 20 XG. So a good 6-goal underperformance, and probably even worse, they've only scored 8 goals from nearly 13 XG inside the 6-yard box. So the XG gods are given and taken away from Villa in nearly equal measure because of the underperformance inside the box. Their overall performance isn't really that great considering the amount of overperformance they've got from outside the box. So it nearly levels up. They are still overperforming their XG overall, but it's maybe not by as much as what you would expect with all these long distance goals.
Yeah, I've got a note written down when I was doing my research for them as well. It says, this from Total Football Analysis on a website that I've picked up, and it says, at times they've struggled for incisiveness, which has led to more long-range shots becoming a weapon in 2025-26. And yeah, it's probably a little bit of bad luck and poor finishing in front of goal in the box, which has led to players like even Mike Cash, didn't mention him. He's got a couple from outside the box this season, a couple of screamers, a couple of well-hit goals. They've got quite a few profiles across the pitch that can do it. So it does make sense. The thing I will add to what you've said is the importance of the double pivot, and I think this is going to be relevant later on in the pod. Those players and those profiles are so important. For most of the season, it's been Kamara and it's been Tielemans, and as a pairing, they kind of complement each other quite well in terms of their skill sets on the ball and off the ball. Not the fastest, most dynamic duo in the world off the ball, but still like diligent in terms of keeping their positions just in front of the back four. Quite often, both of the players there in that role will look to play bounce passes from the fullbacks and the centre-backs to play little triangles to get them up the pitch. They're really important in build-up in that sense, which is why I think they've suffered when those two have been out, or even one of those two has been out, because they're probably the more technically gifted in those deeper pockets. They're definitely more press resistant. They've definitely got better range of pass than someone like Amadou Onana, which is probably why they signed Douglas Luiz, because they had these injuries all at the same time and they needed some extra quality in there that kind of knows the role and is capable in possession, like under pressure. And Luiz is a bit better in that respect than other players they had. It's part of the reason why people might be a bit confused by John McGinn's role, for example. In the last couple of years, he's been pushed up the pitch, even though he's a box-to-box midfielder for most of his career, because he's quite aggressive out of possession, quite a counter-presser. He's someone that they want further up the pitch to do those things rather than be receiving and build-up, because he's not quite as good at that as some of the other options. He's got good energy, he's decent enough defensively and off the ball, he can be quite aggressive, but they don't want him there because of his ability to receive. It's not as good. So he doesn't play that role as much. He plays sometimes as a winger, like a pressy winger, which is obviously very interesting. But that brings on nicely to the next point. How do they set up out of possession as well, Martin?
So it's a 4-4-2 aggressive mid-block, which is something which Emery has become renowned for. He's one of the ones who popularised the 4-4-2 block, I think, and it can be quite aggressive, almost man-to-man at times, and the pull-up fullbacks do push on to help in the press as well, but they can also bring it back when needed and sit more in the solid mid-block. Although, while it did cause some problems in the game I watched the game against Newcastle, it was also probably a little bit too aggressive at times, and Newcastle were able to get around it and create a lot of chances. And out of possession, they actually do give up a fair amount of chances overall. The expected goals against numbers, I think, are around mid-table, around 11th, I think, 10th or 11th, something like that. And the only way that they've sustained being further up the table, really, is because they've got a World Cup winning goalkeeper in between the six, and that his numbers have been fantastic this season. Like, they've conceded 21.28 XG inside their penalty area and only conceded 14 goals from that 7-goal overperformance. Inside the 6-yard box, they've conceded 14.5 XG against and only conceded 8 goals. So
Some
Martinez
of that
is doing
Martinez.
So they're really being favoured by the XG and variance this season. So I don't think it is just a variance from long shots, which is helping them. It's also the variance from them having a goalkeeper who's able to overperform. It's a bit similar to what Burnley had last season for us against us in the Championship last season. The goals conceded, the goals conceded numbers look amazing. So it makes it look like they've got a really good defence when in actual fact the defence isn't really that strong. They are giving up quite a bit of XG, and it's just they're being rescued by a really strong goalkeeper.
Yeah, I'm just having a look now. Obviously, not all of that can be attributed to Martinez. Some of it will just be a bit of bad finishing from the opposition or a bit of unluckiness from the opposition. But he is still first on FOTMOB for goals prevented, which is 4.9. And Jordan Pickford, you will not be surprised to hear, is second with 4.5. So they're both doing very, very well. Clearly, two of the best goalkeepers in the world. Clearly, two of the best goalkeepers going to the World Cup this summer. And that's true. I also love when our notes align, because my main point out of possession was going to be about the fullbacks and how aggressive they are. Bit of research told me that and a bit of looking at them as well from that Newcastle game recently that I watched, that they press in a 4-4-2, pretty aggressive mid-block. But it's probably more like a 4-2-4 at times, with the wingers really pushed on, with the fullbacks really pushed up. And so it can leave the centre-backs pretty exposed. It means there's a lot of space down those channels to do stuff. Cash is not the best or the worst fullback in the world. He's a bit more athletic than their other options. If they're playing Luca Dean, who I don't think they will be at left-back, he's not athletic at all. He's a good footballer, but he can't run. If it's Ian Martin, he's a lot quicker and maybe he can recover a bit better. But I think that's an interesting point to note later on when we talk about possible ways of getting at them as well, for sure. Recent form then, Martin. They have obviously been pretty good this season. They're not only are they third, as we've said, but they're very much in a title race. So what's it look like of late then in terms of their recent form?
So in the last 10 games, I've got the table here from the last 10, and they're fifth. So they've got 17 points from the last 10 games. And in those games they've played, they've beat Forest 3-1, Palace drew 0-0, then lost against Everton, which was a bit of an aberration in terms of the rest of what was here, and then also lost to Brentford as well, 1-0 as well. But then they beat Newcastle 2-0, they drew against Bournemouth, won against Brighton, and they've also lost in a cup against Newcastle recently as well. So some interesting numbers in the recent games, but overall they are fifth in the terms of the overall points, and just a little bit higher than what their expected points says in this period. Their expected points has them at 16 points, so they want 1 point more than what they should have done. In this same period, we've got 14 points and we should have got 15. But
I'll take that, to be honest.
It's not too bad. It could have been worse.
At all. Maybe that's the Newcastle game.
Could be.
Yeah. Anyway, so a bit interesting on the recent defeats that you went through. You didn't actually say, but the games they lost recently, 3 of them, home games, and we were obviously playing them at Villa Park. So they lost to Everton, Brentford and Newcastle. I know that the Newcastle game was in the FA Cup. I know that Villa went ahead and were down to 10 men, but Newcastle were very unlucky not in that game not to have had a few decisions go their way and had to fight back against 10 men, but still kind of deserved what they got in the end because they had other penalty shouts and whatnot. So Villa got a bit lucky. I also did a bit of digging into some of these recent games because you've obviously talked about the fact they're overperforming at both ends of the pitch. And I do think game state plays a part. Taking the lead in 7 of the last 11 fixtures They won 5 of those games, went ahead. So they generally speaking, they do hold on to it, and they're not the best at fighting back when they go behind. If I'd had the time, I would have done the whole season, but I just did a snapshot of recent games because it's probably more relevant. They've won 1, drawn 1, and lost 2 of the last 11 when they've gone behind. So a bit of a game statey team, and like the game that they won was against Salzburg in the Europa League, so they probably just put a lot of the big guns on. That's all that probably happened in that game. Didn't watch it, don't know, just guessing, to win that one. So really, in the Premier League games, in the big games that matter, not been the best in that sense. At all. But do you think they'll do anything different to normal against Leeds? Obviously, with the note being that, their recent home games haven't been as good. Do you think they'll adapt at all, or do you think they're going to still continue to play a similar style?
I can't imagine they'll make any big changes against us. Just one other thing to notice, I've just looked at their form, and they don't tend to do very well when they have a lot of the ball. So in games where they've had more than 55% possession, there's 8 games in which that's happened. They've only won twice. They've drawn twice and lost 4. So it's like a 50% loss rate when they do have less of the ball overall. So they are definitely a side who doesn't do very well when they are forced to have a lot of the ball. So that could be something we talk about in the second part of this, about the way we could adapt to this game rather than them necessarily adapting.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of times when the team they're up against probably go ahead and then do cede possession to Villa, allow them the ball, knowing that their best way of scoring is getting one on the edge of the box and Morgan Rogers ripping one into the top corner, which he's done quite a few times this season, of course, but that's not always going to be a sustainable way, a good way of getting back into games. It's worked okay for them this season, but not as much recently. So yeah, anyway, you don't think there's going to be anything different to normal? I think tactically they're going to largely be the same, especially at home?
Yeah, I would say so.
Right, then standout players and who we think will cause us problems in this one. I think there's quite a lot of players here, even though I do think they've been a bit fortunate this season to be on the points total that they're on, and I don't think they're the 3rd best team in the Premier League. I think they're probably more like the sort of 6th or 7th best team in the Premier League. But they do have quality. The obvious one is Morgan Rogers. He's got the most goal involvements in the Premier League for them. I think it's 13 or 14 off the top of my head. One of the highest for any English player, is slightly more than Calvert-Lewin, who's obviously got 11 with his assist. So yeah, he's the standout. He's been a bit weird this season in the sense that he started the season quite slowly, and then once he got going, he was absolutely relentless and like every game at the moment. Anyone else you think is absolute standout? Like I mentioned, the defensive midfielders, but they still have good quality there, even without the 2 that they've got, for example.
Yeah, so the other player, obviously, who I'm a big fan of is Emi Buendia, and I'm glad that he's
is your name Daniel Farker?
Could be. So yeah, he's a fantastic player, is Buendia. Weirdly enough, they've been playing him off the left, which doesn't appear to me to be the best use of Buendia. He's much more effective when he's on that right channel, but I think he's more wanting to replace what McGinn brought into the side, didn't he? I think was McGinn playing off the left more often. I think
he's played both. McGinn gets used in the 3 behind the striker in different ways. So yeah.
But yeah, so he's definitely more of a narrow winger than what you would see with a lot of Premier League sides. He does like to occupy the half space areas a lot, and even though he was playing off the left in the game I watched, he was quite often found on the right channel. He just naturally gravitated towards there, and that's where he scored his goal from in that game. It was a lovely curled outside the box effort. So yeah, another one who can score long distance goals. But yeah, they've got a strong squad overall, not at its best at the moment because they are without some of their better players. They're without Matty Cash, Yuri Tielemans, John McGinn, Boubacar Kamara. And so they've got a lot of players who are out, and so that will force them to use players who aren't maybe their first choice. Burgard, who I don't really know anything about really, is played at right back. But if Matty Cash is available, I'm not sure how long his injury is for. I couldn't source that, but that's probably a weak link for me that we could look to get at if it is Burgard who's playing there rather than Cash, because I think Cash is a decent enough fullback, not the best in the league, but certainly not the worst, and that is a weak spot we can get at. Obviously, they've got Jadon Sancho on that right channel as well, who's going to be playing, who is definitely a threat 1v1 dribbling wise, but I would say that his overall game. I think they'll probably suffer more for having him in the side than McGinn because of what McGinn brings to out of possession. And I think that they definitely do struggle when McGinn is out. And I think McGinn was out in the game I watched against Newcastle as well. If I'm trying to remember if he played, I don't think he did.
No, he didn't.
So yeah, that definitely is something which causes some problems when they don't have that out of possession work rate that McGinn offers in the attacking press.
Yeah, it's so interesting. Like, I look at that three behind the striker, and I'm just like, you're all really technical, but is anyone a runner? Do they have the right balance there in that sense? I know their fullbacks can be a bit more athletic and bomb on, and they will, because Buendia will cut inside to play as almost like a half winger or an inside playmaker kind of player to combine with players like Rodgers. I kind of get that, but then I just don't think there's a lot of speed in the front three. They obviously let Marlon in January as well. That was another one they loaned an obligation to buy for Roma, so he's basically gone out permanently. He's a bit more of a runner. They've got Leon Bailey, who's a bit more of a runner, but I just don't really understand the three behind the striker and the balance of that. So that's a definite problem for them, in my opinion. We're looking at issues. The thing that really confuses me more is because they're so technical, why are they struggling so much to break teams down? They've got three players there that can really like unlock a game, and yet they don't find the way to do it very often. Sancho, when he gets players around him, yeah, it must be, because Sancho, when you can get players around him, is excellent, like link winger. Like, I know that people don't rate him and don't like him. It's because he's quite often misused. If you use him as a player to bounce the ball off, to kind of dribble into those half spaces, he's really, really threatening when he gets the opportunities to do that. And then other weaknesses, yeah, Bogard, I know a bit more about him. He looked pretty poor in the games I've seen recently. It might just be unlucky that I've seen some poor games. It might just be that he's not playing a lot, so he's not as sharp. He's a bit rusty maybe, but he's definitely a weak link for them if Cash is out. And like I said, the double pivot, and this is where I just want to make one more point, which is Amadou Onana is a player that I really like. There's quite a few players like this in the Premier League. We've got one, Anton Stack, big, powerful unit, like good runner, good athlete, covers a lot of ground, breaks up play really well. But this is the point. He's not really, A, the most technical to break out of pressure, and B, like other midfielders, offered more towards the box. Like his distance shooting from range is pretty good, but other than that, doesn't offer too much, like from a technical standpoint, to break teams down. So they lose a little bit of something there, which puts a lot of pressure on Luiz, who's been really out of form when he was on loan at Nottingham Forest, and suddenly goes from a team in the bottom four on loan to a team in the top four on loan. Maybe the familiarity and the better players around him will help, but I don't know. That's a bit of a weird one. So I do think at right back, I do think in defensive midfield, we can cause them problems. And I do think in terms of their wingers and attacking midfielders, even though they're really good footballers, I think the profiles don't fully make sense to me. And like you said, they haven't maybe coached the best to break teams down. So that's positives for me. Should we end on some stat stuff for this first section then, Martin? There's plenty to go at. As you mentioned, one thing that I picked up on, and I wanted to, you've got your own version of this from Ben Griffiths, but I've looked at, thought, well, just to get a comparison. In terms of expected points over the whole season, Villa are 12th. They are on 32, which is only 5 points above West Ham in 17th, and it's 5 points below Leeds, who are 11th. So we're only one place above them, but 5 points better off. I know there'll be people listening going, expected points are not real points. You're right. Of course you're right. But it is a wild overperformance for them. I don't think they are a top 3 level team like the league table says. I don't also think that the expected points model is probably that accurate either. They're probably a bit more sustainable than this as kind of a top sort of 5, 6, 7 club. And that's where I would pitch them in the league. I think there are at least 4 or 5 teams better than them, but they are kind of in that range just after that.
Most definitely. The expected points just does show that they're doing better than what they maybe should do in terms of the amount of shots and total XG that they get, and compared to their opponents. Put some more, your thing said 12th, mine said 11th, so around similar sort of areas. 11th, 12th is where they maybe should be based on the set. But I'd probably say, like you said earlier, it's maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle. Around 6th, 7th is probably a more fairer basis as to where they should be. I realise that we didn't actually cover their lineup, or we expect that to be, but we covered most of the players.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the lineup we've got here is Martinez in goal, Bogard right back, Concert and Torres and Maatsen. Maatsen is left back. Mings potentially comes into that, but I would expect it to be Torres if he's available rather than Mings. Mings is getting on a bit now. And Onana and Luiz in midfield. Sancho, Rodgers, and Buendia behind Abraham up front.
Could be
Then the other,
Watkins, I guess. But
I
yeah,
won't go through. I won't go through all the stats here because I've got quite a lot, and some of them aren't. Some of them aren't interesting, some of them aren't. But one of the more interesting ones for me, at least, was the pressing data. So they have the 19th most high recoveries against them. So that means that other teams are able to get a lot of high recoveries from them. So 19th most, 7.12 high recoveries per game goes against them. So that is quite a lot of high recoveries. So a lot of teams who are able to cause them problems in deeper areas. This could speak to the midfield balance, which you mentioned about not having a lot of technicality in that midfield. So that is something quite interesting. And then the other end of the pitch, their high recoveries is also very low as well. 18th in the league at 4.42. Only a couple sides who had less than them. I think one of them was Burnley. Shock, surprise. But it's not really drastically less than what ours is. Ours is 4.96 per 90. But you'd maybe expect them to, since they're a club we're in third, that they would have a bit more high recoveries than us, because we probably defended more than they do in our deeper areas. But yeah, they both ends of the pitch, there's a lot of high recoveries in the games that they play. Maybe that speaks to a bit of chaos that Emery wants to try to factor into this a bit, which could mean that it could be a bit of a basketball game, as a term goes, this one. And then the other thing of note, which I noticed in the stats, was the crosses. They don't cross very often. So the 18th for crosses, only City and Burnley cross the ball less. City, obviously, because they prefer to pass into the box. Burnley, because they are caca-poo-poo.
And Villa, I think, is probably because they're looking for cutbacks to the edge of the box rather than crosses. Yes.
Which is what the next app, passes into the opposition box, plays out at. They're fifth in the league for passes into the opposition box, so they also, like City, prefer to pass into the box rather than cross it, and they look for a lot of cutbacks in their things. So I could go into more data here, but I think those are the most interesting ones. Most of the rest, the XG and everything, is around mid-table. Nothing else really stands out around there. So yeah, they're a lot lower than what they should be in terms of the underlines, is to say the least.